The second book of the Torah is Shmos. And what is it all about? It begins with the enslavement. Jews come down to Egypt on very positive terms. They're invited by Pharaoh to come down. Yaakov is told, come, we'll give you the best part of the country to raise your sheep. And for 17 years, Yaakov lives in Egypt, and it's the best years of his life. He's reunited with Yosef. The entire family is together. They have a yeshiva so that the Torah can be studied, and life is great. But then the old king dies and a new king arises, and he doesn't remember what Joseph did for the country. Either he doesn't remember because he's got ADD or something, or he chooses not to remember. And he enslaves the people. He asks them to volunteer to help build the country like good citizens, patriots. And of course, Jews are always the first to fall for that argument, because we're so grateful for the hospitality. So the Jews, of course, immediately volunteer to help fix the infrastructure. So they go to work and everybody's working together, and they don't notice that one by one, the others are slipping away and going back to their own work. And by the time they realize that they were tricked, there's no option anymore. They're enslaved, and quite viciously. The worst part of it was the psychological torture. They would build buildings and then knock it down because nobody needed it, which is psychologically devastating. In fact, the archaeological studies going back to Egypt of that day actually shows that the buildings were built very poorly and did not even last a year. Now we know why. They were manufacturing bricks made of straw and mud, not very well baked or completed or finished. And so the buildings were very structurally unsound, and then you could just knock it down and start all over again. How long did this last, actually? So we know Jews lived in Egypt for 210 years. From the time Jacob comes down to Egypt to the time they leave with Moshe, it's 210 years. They were not enslaved that entire time. The actual slavery was like 82 years or 81 years. The actual torture. So it was only one generation that was enslaved. They also found in the Egyptian record that around that time, there was a dramatic increase in infant mortality. We know why that was. Because Pharaoh was paranoid. His astrologers told him that a little boy is going to be born who's going to take the Jews out of Egypt. And so he had every newborn baby killed, if it was male. So most of the skeletons that they found, infant mortality, most of those skeletons were little boys. And they were around 3 months old, or just under 3 months old, which was the cutoff. You can hide a child for about 3 months. After that, it's much harder to conceal the child. And in fact, Moshe was put into the basket and floated down the Nile when he was about 3 months old. So it was a particularly cruel, sadistic enslavement. One of the important details in the story, when Moshe comes to Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go," Pharaoh refuses. There's a plague, and he still refuses. 2 plagues, 3 plagues, he refuses. And God tells Moshe, "I am going to harden his heart, and he will refuse to let the people go." Now, the moral question is, if God hardens his heart, then why does he deserve to be punished? How does that work? God is seemingly forcing him or causing him to sin, and then he punishes him. So we have to understand that. That can't be. That is not right at all. God hardens Pharaoh's heart, not that he should hate Jews or want to enslave Jews or continue to be cruel. No, that was him. That was his choice, his nature, whatever. The hardening of the heart was he will not be impressed with the plague. In other words, he won't let the Jews go out of fear of a plague. That's what the hardening of the heart was. When Pharaoh eventually does let the Jews go, it's not because of plagues, because he realizes that he's wrong. That's a moral victory for the world. So God says, "I will harden his heart, and he will not let the people go." These are 2 separate things. I will harden his heart. He will not be impressed with the plague. And then secondly, he won't let them go because he is still Pharaoh. So his freedom of choice was not interfered with. On the contrary, God hardens his heart so that the plague does not take away his freedom of choice. That's a very strong moral message, because we are supposed to serve God and fulfill his mitzvahs, not because we're afraid of punishment and not because we want a reward. So when God hardens his heart, it was to allow him to continue to make his choice until he becomes righteous, and not act righteous because he wants to avoid a plague. So it's actually a very moral effect. God demands morality, not cowardice. So if Pharaoh lets the people go because the next plague is really scary, then there hasn't been a moral improvement. It's just bullying. So what do the 10 plagues show? That Pharaoh was not a simple-minded dictator. He was a very powerful person, not intimidated by plagues. He did what he thought was right. And what he thought was right was very evil. But the objective is that such evil should surrender to goodness and choose to do the right thing because it's right, not because of ulterior motives. And I guess that's why there had to be 10 plagues. If God simply wanted to intimidate and crush Pharaoh so that he will let the people go, he could have just brought the 10th plague to begin with, because that's the one that seemed to scare him the most. The death of the firstborn, well, he was a firstborn. So it seems like The reason Pharaoh eventually uh, surrendered was because, oh, this plague was too much for him. Well, then bring that one right from the beginning and save a lot of time and a lot of waste of good wheat and produce and fresh water. I mean, why make all that mess? Turning the water to blood, destroying all the crops, destroying all the animals. Why not just bring the 10th plague and the whole problem will be over within days? So now we look at it. Pharaoh wasn't intimidated by the 10th plague either. And that's why when he calls Moshe and he says, take the people and go, he says, go because God is righteous and I have been wicked, not because I'm afraid to die. So all of a sudden, Pharaoh is looking a lot better as a human being. Was it worth 80 years of slavery to bring Pharaoh to his senses? Was that the purpose? I hope not. I hope we're not the what they call the miner's canary. Some people, even rabbis, say the Jewish role, the Jewish people are in this world to be the miner's canary. When miners are working down in the mines, there are noxious gases that are fatal, very dangerous, but you don't smell them. So how do the miners know when to get out of the mine because they released that poisonous gas? They took canaries with them, and the canaries are very sensitive to this gas. So when you see them fainting, keeling over, it's time to get out. That's called the miner's canary. So some people believe that's our role in the world. When evil comes along, we're the first ones to suffer, and that warns the rest of the world that this evil is dangerous. That's a terrible role to have. Now, we're not here to save other people's lives at the cost of our lives. That's a horrible thought. But we are here to make the world better. And we do that in two ways: pleasant ways and unpleasant ways. We teach, we share knowledge with the world to make the world better. We are role models for devotion to God despite all difficulties. And in that way, we elevate the world to a more moral awareness, a more moral behavior. But the suffering is not for somebody else's benefit. They do benefit when they see Jews being indestructible, when they see Jews being unmovable. We don't give up our faith, we don't convert, we don't quit, we don't surrender to evil. Of course, that's a very important moral lesson for the observers, but that is not why we suffer. God forbid, to cause one person to suffer so that another person would benefit. Now, when we choose that, when a parent chooses to put themselves through difficulty for the benefit of the child, that's a hero. That's bigger than life. But that can only be voluntary. God would not impose that because no evil comes from above. So why we suffer, we still don't know. There is not a good answer. We're not going to know until Mashiach comes. Then we're going to get an answer. We might not like it. We might not be content with the answer, but there will be an answer. Until then, we don't know. But whether we're having a good time and we are teachers, sharing knowledge with the world in peaceful, pleasant ways, or we are victimized and persecuted by the world, either way, the world is learning, the world is getting better. And that's why we can be very confident that at this point in history, the world has gotten better and it continues to get better, and it is ready for Mashiach. It is ready to mature, to become moral, to become godly. There's nothing preventing it. The evil is flimsy, it's shallow, it's just a thin coating over the goodness that we've created in the thousands of years since the Torah was given. So we have now a very good world that is covered by a thin layer of evil. And that's why the evil is so senseless, so transparently evil, so ridiculously evil, because it's wearing thin. On the one hand, that is very hard to tolerate. It's like you have a kid, your child, who you know is a good child, a really, really good child, and yet something is making the child miserable, and the child is misbehaving and wasting time and not living up to his own potential. That is so frustrating. In a sense, it would be easier to simply say, boy, this is one rotten kid. But they're not. They're really, really good kids. And they could be doing so much good and making such progress and growing, and they're not. And that just eats you up. The fact that the good is so obvious just under the surface adds to the frustration. Like, come on, what is wrong with you? You can so easily be good. Why are you not? So that's how the world is behaving today. So on the one hand, it's really, really frustrating more than ever. And on the other hand, you know, this is not going to last much longer. The good just under the surface is so much stronger, so much more real, so much more desirable. Why would anybody continue with this foolishness when you can have such a good world? So this is where we are. The last generation of exile for the Jewish people and the world, and the first generation of redemption for the Jewish people and for the world. And so many people are saying, in different words, in different ways, if things get better for the Jews, it will get better for everybody. If things are not good for the Jews, it's not good for anybody. Those who bless you will be blessed. It's true. If the world is still not godly, then the Jews suffer the most. When the world becomes godly, everyone stops suffering. Now it's pretty much like a classroom. If the classroom is orderly and they're doing their work and they're progressing and they're learning, everybody is happy, particularly the teacher. But when the class is undisciplined and no learning is happening, regardless of whose fault it is, the one who pays the biggest price is the teacher. The students may be causing the problem, but they're never responsible. The responsibility is always on the teacher. So we are living in really, really exciting times. And it's true. One more mitzvah, one more aha moment for the world, and we're home. That really is all it takes.
If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal. It's questions and answers. It's conversation. It's really relaxed. It's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us. Take a look. Click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.